looking back on all of the traits and characteristics that he had at 16, that's what everyone looks at now, and they call it the Mamba mentality.
What up, y'all? What up, y'all? This your boy, JP. Welcome to Shooting the Shits. It's my very first episode. I got a very, very special guest. We've been talking and having great conversations, email, phone conversations. And man, he knows his shit. He's a screenwriter, amazing with his writing. But he also was a teammate of the late, great Kobe Bryant at Lower Merion High School, and where they won the championship in 1996. And he got so many stories to tell. So welcome to the show, Robby Schwartz. What's up, Robby? How you doing?
What's going on, man? Pleasure to be on with you. I'm honored to be the first podcast, because obviously you're in for a big future. So it's cool to be at the ground level. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, man, for sure, man. Thank you so much for coming on. It's
Sure.
an honor for me, man. You reached out to me. It's just like, oh, wow, a teammate of Kobe Bryant. And you seen like my stuff that I do in terms of my reels on Instagram or any social media platform. And man, I'm just glad to have you on, man.
Yeah, it was interesting. Somebody, one of my friends sent me I think one of your reels that you did about Kobe that, was well done. And I get stuff like that kind of sent to me just randomly for the last, I would say 10, 15 years, whenever social media really became big. And it just caught me, and I was like, you know what? I'm like, let me just like reach out to this guy. It was just one of those things. And like a lot of times when I get that feeling to do it, it's like, just do it. Like, stop thinking about like, you never know what could happen unless you actually try something. So I was like, let me just email this guy. And I think he emailed you at like 4 a.m, which was like, it's an insane time. Like my schedule is so bizarre with, because I like to write overnight.
Yeah.
If I don't just like reach out to him, it's going to be in my mind all night and I'm not going to be able to sleep. So I just shot you an email and I was like, hey, checked out your stuff. And I was like, man, this might be kind of cool. It's an interesting time with it coming up on 5 years since he passed away, which, I mean, how it's been 5 years, I don't think anyone can sort of fully grasp how long it's been. And, a lot of conversation, especially like with LeBron, and people always will talk about Jordan. And sometimes I feel like Kobe kind of gets left out of the conversation because he's not around anymore.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, the all-time greats, and everyone has their opinion about that. And, I've been asked that a million times. Clearly I'm biased. You talk to my father, he'll tell you Wilt Chamberlain was the greatest player ever. It's just like bizarre. And I told you before, like my mom went to the same high school as Wilt Chamberlain. She went to Overbrook High School.
That's dope.
My dad, I think he was on the same team. I know he went to the same high school. I think he was like a freshman when this guy was a senior, was Earl Monroe, Monroe, which is crazy because like growing up, it was always like he played with a guy in high school who went on to become, a great NBA player. And who would have ever thought that like I would play with someone who was better than Earl Monroe? Like there aren't that many players that are like better than Earl Monroe.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe there's something in our lineage where like whoever high school we go to, there's going to be a guy on that team that's going to go to the league and go on to be like an all-time great. So
right.
It's just an interesting sort of background, but I figured now is a good time to hop on with someone and just sort of, shoot the shit, talk some stories. There's a lot of like really, I mean, there's some stories that everybody sees the same highlights from high school. You see, Kobe going coast to coast and dunking versus Chester and blowing the roof off the Palestra. There are stories that everyone does know, which are great stories. And it's, as I was telling you before, when you're in high school, you don't realize, like back in '96 when we won the state championship, like you don't realize how special that year was.
Yeah.
When you're 16 years old. I didn't. I mean, like I said, I was the last guy on the bench, literally, like the last guy that got in at the very end of the game when we were like blowing cats out, like 50 points, And, in the moment, you're like, oh, God, this is so embarrassing. Like, I'm getting in with 10 seconds left, and like there's 3,000 people and like your parents are in the stands. And you get out of high school and then you look back, you're like, man, it was just such an unbelievable year. Like, we got to do things, like we went to South Carolina on like a private plane.
Wow.
Something called the Beach Ball Classic, which I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's in South Carolina. Are you in South Carolina?
I'm in Greenville, South Carolina.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I do be hearing about the Beach Ball Classic. Yeah.
Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
Myrtle Beach. Yeah. And that was, I remember that year because there were some other guys at the tournament that also went on to play in the NBA. Mike Bibby was at Shadow Mountain High School out of Arizona. Like, we watched him play. I think he dropped like 63 one game, and you're like, whoa, like, who is this guy? And then, the next year he goes to Arizona, wins the national championship. Jermaine O'Neal was also there.
South Carolina.
Jermaine O'Neal, I can't remember the name of the high school, and I should know this, but his team was there. I think it was something Oaks maybe, but he was exceptional. There was a guy, Lester Earl, who played at Kansas. There was Shaheen Holloway, who was an incredible high school player and played in college for a while. But it was like the cream of the crop, Christmas break tournament that we got invited to, clearly because Kobe was on the team, and then postseason, Kobe won Gatorade Player of the Year, and Gatorade like took us out to this really nice steak restaurant like in the suburbs around where we live. It was the most expensive steak I ever had in my entire life and will ever have, because Gatorade was footing the bill. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get this. It's like 100. I mean, it was like a ridiculous, but like stuff like that, like it's not normal. Like it's so it's so abnormal that like you don't know how to like fully appreciate it in the time. Like the couple days after we won the state championship, we had a parade. We got to ride on fire trucks like through the community. Me, like I'm on a fire truck, like waving to like fans or like thousands of people like lined up. I mean, it was just, we went to the state capitol like the next day. Like it was just all this incredible stuff. And it was all obviously thanks to him. Like we weren't doing that stuff without, and so when you look back and now it's been, I mean, it's almost coming up on like 30 years, which is like, that's crazy to even say. But like I said, like you get out of high school and like college, like everybody you meet in college is the questions, what was he like?
Yes.
Oh, it's just kind of cool. Like people, like I used to play basketball up at this place called Trees Hall at the University of Pittsburgh. And when the guys knew, like when I told them I played with Kobe in high school, like they started calling me Kobe. I don't think they ever knew my real name. They were just like, "Oh, Kobe." I'm like, "Oh, Kobe." Like, okay, like it's kind of cool, And then as time went on, as I was telling you when we spoke on the phone, like you get like 10 years out of high school, right? And at this time, you're talking about 2006, like Kobe had already won 3 titles. He was like world renowned and the most loved basketball player in the world. You enter into this area of like a little bit of fatigue where it's like, do I have to tell the same stories over and over and over again? Like I've told the same stories to the Washington Post, the New York Times, like Sports Illustrated, like any major outlet you could think about. Like we had like when during the season, we used to have news crews at like our practices.
Wow.
So like I'm walking out to get a drink of water, and there's like a guy from like NBC 10 who wants to ask me a question. I'm like,
what?
It's just strange, like hey, how's practice going? I'm like, it's like you're seeing yourself on TV, and like there was a certain amount of like celebrity that like went along with it, and it had its perks, obviously. But when you get a certain amount of years removed from that time, there was that fatigue that set in. You're like, oh my gosh, but is this ever going to end? Like, I remember, after they won back to back in 09 and 10 when they beat the Magic and then they beat the Celtics, you're like this is I remember thinking like this is never going to end. Like I'm going to be answering these questions forever. He's always going to be in the news, and like he's always going to be so popular that people want to know these stories.
Yeah.
And then, obviously when he passed, you're like, man, like you really gain total appreciation for how special that time was, and you enjoy speaking about these things and thinking about the fun times we had, traveling to the games and going into other people's gyms, and like, we would come out of the locker room, there would be like 100 people waiting for autographs, like getting to the bus was like difficult, like after the games. And to his credit, like I remember this about him even back when we were 16, 17 years old. And it's something that came out when he talked about why he always plays, even if he's a little banged up or if he doesn't feel good. And he always talked about, there might be someone in the stands that night that came to see him that might not ever get to see him play again. And he felt this like level of responsibility, to put on a good performance for him. And it was true in high school. Like, he would sign as many autographs as possible. Like we had to get home at some point. We'd school the next day. And there's hundreds of people that are like, yeah, can we get your autograph? Can we get your autograph? And he was very, very warm and inviting. And like I said, eventually we had to go home. The bus had to leave at a certain it's funny. It reminds me of this one story. I had friends of mine that would always ask me to try to get his autograph, right? This is like in high school, by the way. So imagine you're asking a high school teammate for an autograph. Like that sentence alone is just crazy. Like that's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
I did it one time, and it was for my grandmother. And she's not with us anymore. But she said, I would really appreciate if you got Kobe's autograph for me. I said, for you, I'm going to do it. Practice ends. We were in our main gym, which is no longer there, because they built this brand new Kobe Bryant gymnasium, which is like state of the art. It's an unbelievable gym. But this is it was like an old wooden matchbox kind of gym, like it reminds you of like Hoosiers, like that kind of gym. Like there were dead spots on the floor, and like the bleachers pulled out. Like it was the greatest gym ever.
Yeah.
The wrestling area was up top where people used to stand when the place was sold out, which was like every game. So practice ends, and I'm like, oh God, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to wait till like no one's around, because like it's so embarrassing. And so I go up to him and I go, listen, I hate to ask this.
Yeah.
Grandmother, Betty Schwartz, would love, she would really love your autograph. No problem. He did it. No problem, signed it. My grandmother had it like in one of those like magnets that like went on the fridge. So it was like in like a, not a glass case, but like a hard plastic case.
Hard plastic case, yeah.
She loved it. Like she was so happy that I got it for her. But like I remember one of my teammates like overheard me asking him, and he's like, oh, what's your grandmother's name? Robby? And I'm like, oh God. Like, it's just so bad, but he was so cool about it. But that was the only time I ever asked him for an autograph. It was just that one time. It was for my grandmother. But he, you think about like the pressure to like be a guy like that in high school, and like high school's a strange time. Like for all of us, we were trying to figure ourselves out. you're just trying to get through the day. You're trying to get a date for the prom, like all this whack. He's worried about like, am I going to college? Am I going to the NBA? I got to sign autographs of these, like, and that year in 96, the pressure was state championship or bust. Was it anything less? You expect a guy like that to win a state championship, the best player in the country. He was the Gatorade player of the year. Like it was all sort of on his shoulders. And I mean, some of the games that year were just like, we went 31-3 that year, but at one time our record was like 4-3. We had some really tough games. I remember we played Roman Catholic, who had a guy named Donnie Carr, who was an unbelievable high school player who ended up playing at LaSalle, I think. And actually, it had an NBA guy. I think Rasul Butler was on that team, who I think also passed away a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That team was stacked. And then we played St. Anthony's out of New Jersey, which is like one of the best high school programs in the country. They smoked us. Like, they beat us by I think it was definitely double digits. And then we lost one game at the Beach Ball Classic. And we were 4-3. We came home from South Carolina 4-3. And then won 27 straight games. And he was just on a mission. Like I mean, some of the teams we played were just like, they were future dentists and lawyers, and they weren't like that good. I mean, we beat some teams by like 50 points in a high school game, which is kind of crazy. Now, not so much because, the three-pointer is so prevalent. But back then, like blowing a team out by 50 was
that meant something.
Big deal. Yeah, and it also meant I had an opportunity to play. Which also cool. Like I scored 4 points my junior year. So I was a junior when he was a senior. I scored 4 points the whole year. But they were the loudest 4 points. You would have thought, John Starks just dunked over Horace Grant and Michael Jordan. Like the pop from the crowd was like so loud. Meanwhile, they were like breakaway layups with no one around. Oh my gosh. But yeah, it's just wild to look back on that time and, being a part of it and being there to kind of see the ascension that he went through, from just this tall, wiry high school kid into, first round pick by the Hornets, gets traded to the Lakers. And then it was just like, boom, like a rocket ship, like it did not take long at all. But the thing I'll never forget too, like the first year that he was with the Lakers, like he didn't play right away. Like, and I remember watching the games and thinking like, oh my God, like now he knows how I felt. Like he's the guy going in, when they were up, they were blowing like the Knicks out. I think his first points, if memory serves me correct, I believe his first points were a foul shot against the Knicks in like a blowout win. But it took some time. But I think I and everybody else knew that once he got the chance, he was just going to, he would do whatever it took to get better, to get himself to be the player he always thought he would be. And he did. And, the reason we knew that was because personally, our team, I saw the work ethic early. I saw the drive at 16. Again, your list of things you're trying to accomplish at 16, it wasn't the same for me as it was for him, as it was for anybody else on our team. So that year, 96, it was one of the first practices of the year. So we get done with practice and he announces in front of the whole team and the coaches and everything. He's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna come before school tomorrow and get some shots up and practice. He's like, anybody else want to come with me? There was this dead silence. Everyone's looking around like, is he serious? Like, so no one says anything. And I'm like, I'll go. Like, yeah, sure. Like he lived in the same area as me, same neighborhood. We both grew up in Wynwood. And he was like, maybe like a 4-minute drive for me, 5-minute drive. I said, yeah, I'll go. He's like, all right, I'll pick you up at 4:45. I'm like, oh my God, 4:45. I'm like, what? I go, like, like before school. So now, full disclosure, I will tell you that in my mind, the reason that I volunteered for this was like, okay, I'm going to practice with him in the morning. We're going to develop this like crazy like chemistry, right? Like,
Yeah.
and he's going to go to coach and be like, you got to play him. Like we had, in my mind, I'm like, that's what's going to happen. We're going to be like Stockton and Malone, and like he's just going to see that like my passes were like magic or something.
Yeah.
So I'm all excited. Next morning, I remember I was waiting downstairs, and my dad came down because he was always an early riser. And he's like, "What are you doing awake?" I'm like, Kobe's picking me up. We're gonna go practice before school. And he's like, "Okay." So I'm all excited. We go to the gym. So there were three gyms at Lower Merion. There was the main gym where we played. There was the Downs gym, which was like a smaller gym, and then there was the Ardmore gym, which was like the auxiliary gym. It was connected to the pool. It was kind of off to the side. So we go there. The janitor let us in. Like he was there at like 5 a.m. Turns on the lights. You hear that, bzz, the big fluorescent bulbs are like, they take like minutes to light up, which is
Yes.
like, think about now, like now you go in, you flip a switch. This had to like warm up. And I just remember being in there and like, I could hear that sound so clearly, that buzzing. And, you put your shoes on and I'm all geeked up. I'm like, here we go. This is going to be it. I ended up rebounding for him for like 90 minutes. Didn't take one shot. Like one shot. I just rebounded. And I was like, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just happy to be there. I was like, this is great. I was cool. This is awesome. But like, I didn't take one. I remember I'm like, I'm not getting a shot. Like it was just constant, like, go around the circle, 3-pointers, like foul shots. Like it was just, but it was intense. Like there was an intensity to it, which I always tell people, like there was an intensity with everything he did. Everything was intentional. Everything was about getting better. Everything was about improving, and being around that. Like even now, like I always say, like the two people that influenced my work ethic the most, my father and Kobe. They were, obviously my dad was getting up that insane hour in the morning, and Kobe just being around someone who was so talented and so gifted at such a young age, but didn't stop there. This, there's a lot of guys coming out of high school that look like the next big thing. A lot of guys. And they never pan out because I think that they're just so used to being the best player on their team. When NBA, that's the best player on every team that they've ever been on. And now you have a collection of those guys. So what separates one guy from the next? And it's work ethic. It's just desire to be the best. And so when you see that and you're around it, it's infectious. It gets in you, and it gets into your soul, and like you don't want to be the guy who's not giving it all at that moment, because he would let you know. And that's not a. I've seen him get on people, and I've seen where he didn't expect everyone to be like the best player on the team. He just expected them to give all that they had to contribute to the team getting better. And so yeah, they're going to, and we did that at practice a couple times, like in the morning. I mean, it was just crazy because like we had practice, then we had school, and then we had practice again. I mean, it's like you're doing 2-a-days at 16, which is a little more normal now, but back then it was just unheard of. Like
unheard of, yeah.
It was just unheard of. His conditioning, it was just that drive. Couple times too after practice. So again, we get done with practice, and there were a couple people that would stay. They would do some shooting drills, some extra stuff, and I found myself a handful of times playing one-on-one against him. Now, again, when I was 16, I was 5'6", like 30 pounds, soaking wet. Like I was a very short, skinny kind of kid. The reason I made the team was I hustled, I could dribble, I could shoot, I was really quick. I would take charges. I was that guy, diving on the floor for loose balls, all that crap. Because I realized I was the only like talent-wise, I was nowhere near as good as anyone on the team, but that was my role. So I found myself a couple times playing him one-on-one. Now, again, you think like one-on-one, you play to like 11, right? 21. We played one-on-one to 100.
What?
By one. Okay.
By one.
By one. Right.
Oh, wow.
Do you want to take a guess on what some of the final scores were? Like if I said to you, like, what's the most amount of points you thought I would score one-on-one up to 100? What would you guess?
Man, I would say like 10 or 11.
It's a pretty good guess. I think, and again, this was so long ago, so my memory's a little sketchy. I thought one time I scored like 11 points, right? And what's funny is like years later, and there were some games, by the way, I lost like 100 to like 2. I don't think I ever got shut out because like, you got to get somewhat tired at some point. Like I could shoot in for a layup, But years later, after high school, someone asked him about that. I think it was like in a book I got interviewed for, and I may have mentioned the 11 or 12 points. I think I scored one game. And he completely shot that down. He's like, there's no way. He's like, there's no way he scored like 12. Now look, 100 to 12 is a thrashing. Like that's a thrashing of a game. And he was like, no, he never scored 12. Like there's no way. I mean, this is 15 years later. He's like coming off winning like an NBA championship, and some idiot's asking him about like a one-on-one game he played against a 5'6" bench warmer, and he wouldn't concede that I scored like 11 or 12 points, which. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but like, believe me, like every time I actually did score, I was like, wow, like I just scored on the best player in the country. Like I can do anything. Like I really like thought like there's nothing, and I still like to this day, whenever I'm forced or whenever I'm in a situation that seems improbable or like I always think like, okay, like I did that. Like I scored on the best player in the country. I took a charge from him. I stood up to him in practice. I like there's not like what am I scared of? Like there's nothing to be scared of. You can stand up to that. You can stand up to anything. I'll tell you another really funny story from practice. So we used to do this drill. It was a 3-on-2, 2-on-1 drill. So you have 2 guys on defense, 3 guys on offense. The 3 guys on offense come down with the ball. Whoever takes the shot has to run back and play defense. So the 3-on-2 going this way becomes a 2-on-1 going back that way. I'm on defense with another guy. He's on offense with 2 other guys coming down. He takes the shot, makes it. So now he's the defender. So I take the ball out of the basket, coming down on a 2-on-1 fast break. I pump faked to my teammate coming in from the left, went in for the layup. He stood under the basket and tried to like take a charge, right? It was a flop, like he flopped. I barely touched him, but he was just trying to practice the taking a charge.
Yeah.
So the layup goes in, and I'm pumped, way too pumped. I take the ball out of the basket, I toss it at him. He's laying on the ground.
Oh no. Oh no!
And I'm feeling myself, right?
You're feeling yourself, yeah.
I'm running back. All my teammates are down there, and I'm like, I am so jazzed up. They're all pointing at me, right? And I think like they're like, yeah, that's right. God, you play. That was awesome. And I realize they're like pointing like something's going on. I turn around, and the ball is being whipped at my head at like a feverish speed, and like the Matrix, I like. At the last second, like did like a Neo sort of like full back bend, and the ball like sailed over my head, like barely missing my face.
Wow.
And he's just like standing there, doesn't say anything. but he was not happy.
He was not happy.
Like, he was not happy that, like, I tossed the ball. And you know what? Like, looking back, I mean, it's a kind of an a-hole thing to do. I was so jazzed up that, like, I don't know. I kind of, you lose yourself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you play basketball, like you get an and one, or like like I watch guys on TV, and you see them sort of react sometimes, like a Westbrook or somebody like that, and it's like I understand why. Now, he's a little on the crazy side. Like, I love Westbrook. Like, his passion just comes out, but like, you lose yourself in those moments. But yeah, I was lucky to get out of that. I mean, the ball, like, it was so, like, I can remember, like, the ball was just, it was like everything slowed down. Like, from the moment I turned, like, you see the ball coming, like, right at you, and I was like, whoo, and not a word was said. Practice continued on. We moved on. I'd love to tell you that was the last time that we had an altercation. No, we never had an altercation like a Michael Jordan punching Steve Kerr. Did you see the Last Dance, the 30?
Yes, I did.
Unbelievable, right?
Great.
Unbelievable. But as I'm watching it and I'm listening to that Steve Kerr story, about how he kept, and then Steve Kerr, like, just kind of snapped and, like, hit him in the chest, and then Jordan popped him. It reminded me, so again, we're at practice and we're doing a 3-on-3 round robin tournament with all the guys on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, him being the best player on the team, me being the worst, we were on the same team. We're in the finals, right? This is the finals. Our team has the ball. It's a tie game. He's got the ball at the top of the key. He passes the ball to me. I'm on the left. I catch it. He kind of cuts through to the left corner. In my mind, and again, somewhat delusional mind, I'm thinking everyone's going to think I'm going to pass the ball back to him. Like, last shot, right? Like, So I'm like, okay, I'm going to pump fake to him, drive the lane, score the winning bucket. So just like I thought, I catch it. He cuts, pump fake. My defender slides towards him. The lane opens up. Here we go. Dribble into the lane, go up for the layup. I could see. I could see it. It's like going right up.
It's coming. Yeah.
Guy comes out of nowhere, blocks the shot, puts the ball back in. We lose the game.
Oh.
So, you ever have, like, a moment in your life where someone's staring at you, but you don't want to look? Like, you can just tell, like, you can, like, feel, like, someone's eyes on you. So that was me. I was like, I knew he wasn't happy. Like, you could just tell. Like, we like, he never really lost anything at practice. Like, hated losing. Like, the expression, some people hate losing more than they like winning. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but, like, it sounds good. But he did not like losing at anything, any drill, anything. So I could, like, again, like, nothing was really said, but I could feel he was, like, leering at me, like, and I'm like, oh God, like, so uncomfortable, So I turn around, and again, sometimes I say things I should. I was like, what? And he's like, what? He's like, what are you doing? He's like, what are you thinking? He goes, you're taking the last shot? Like, this is crazy. Like, what do you think? You're the superstar here? Like, what are you doing? You cost us the game. And I'm letting him go, and I'm letting him go, and I'm like, okay, eventually he's going to stop berating me, which totally justified in doing. I had no business taking that shot. So I'm letting him go, and I'm letting him go, and I finally, like, I couldn't take it anymore. And I was like, all right, man. I'm like, I got it. Will you please, like, relax? As soon as I said that word relax, I could see, like, the fire, like, light up in his eyes. He's like, what? He's like, you're telling me to relax? He's like, relax. He's like, this, and I'm like, yeah, dude. I'm like, this is practice. Like, we're practicing. And the famous Allen Iverson, like, practice line. I think he was first with this. He's like, this is not about practice. Because this is war out here. And I'm like, whoa, like, this is crazy. And then, like, his eyes, I just remember he was so crazed because someone was, like, questioning, like, what we were doing and the fact that I cost the team the game. I mean, there were a lot of things at play. and he kind of like he didn't lunge at me, but like, you know how like people like step sometimes, or like I turned around and sprinted out of the gym as fit. You've
Wow.
like the road runner. Like I didn't turn back. I ran out through the gym, through the double doors. Next thing I know, I'm up near the nurse's office, like halfway. I turn around. Of course, no one's in the hallway. And I'm like, oh God, like this is so embarrassing. Now I got to walk back into practice, tail between my legs. So I kind of slinked into practice. Nobody said anything. We just carried on with practice. I felt it's one of those moments where did I think he was going to do anything? No, I didn't think so. He was mad. I just reacted. Like, again, he's like a foot taller than me. Like, again, I'm a very short, skinny guy. I wasn't waiting around to find out. I was not in that position. I was out the door. I mean, I ran so fast that day. And again, next thing I remember turning around the hallway, and it was like, it was like a ghost town. Like, there's no one in the hallway. But again, that all goes to just, someone who never wanted to lose anything. Like, it didn't matter. 3-on-3 drill, 3-on-2, 2-on-1 drill, anything. I don't know if did you ever play basketball? Were you a basketball guy at all?
I mean, I play basketball like for pickup and stuff. I'm trying to play basketball on the team, never made it, but I did like touch ball, but other than that, it's mostly been pickup basketball and stuff.
Sure. Do you know what a suicide is?
Yes.
Okay. Probably not a great name, I think, in the age of political correctness. You know what I mean? Which I mean, it's just, but that's just, we always called it. Like, so let's just call it the running drill, right? So start on one baseline, baseline, foul line, baseline, half court, baseline, other foul line, baseline, full court back there. So we're doing those at the end of practice, endurance wise. And this was one of the things I was really good at because I was really, really quick, really fast. So this was like, this is my time to shine here. At the end of practice, everyone's dog tired. Like our coach Greg Downer, who's still at Lower Merion, which is crazy. And by the way, won 2 more state championships after Kobe, which
shout out.
Yeah. Great coach. Reminds you of like Coach K, sort of that like presence, you know what I mean? I mean, he's been there forever and took over the team when we were not very good. Obviously, Kobe being there really helped him. But again, after he left, I mean, he won a state title, I think, in 2005, and then again in like 2013. Like, he really, and Lower Merion has had some really good players. You remember the NBA guy Samuel Dallenberg?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it was his nephew or his cousin played at Lower Merion.
Oh, wow.
Really good player. A guy by the name of Darryl Reynolds, who was on the Villanova National Championship team in 2016, Lower Merion guy. And one other guy played in the league. He still might be. I know he had a couple 10-day contracts. His name is BJ Johnson.
Yes.
Really good player. Ridiculous in high school. He was on one of the state championship teams, and then there was 2 other kids, Garrett Williamson and Ryan Brooks. Garrett Williamson played at St. Joe's. Ryan Brooks played at Temple. So, I mean, there's been some talent that's come through Lower Merion. Myself, obviously. But that's just a joke. He really, like, his coaching career was just real. I mean, to win 2 more after that, because everyone thought, like, oh, like, who wouldn't win with Kobe? But then he did it 2 more times.
Shout out.
Yeah, circling back to the running drill that we did. I remember one time I got out to a quick start. I was ahead of everybody else. We're on the home stretch, baseline to baseline and back, and we're coming to the finish, and I feel like something was like holding me like back, like tugging on my pin jersey that we used to wear, those pin-up jerseys, those awful mesh things, and it was Kobe. He pulled my jersey back so he could win the running drill. Like who does that? Like you couldn't let me just have this one moment of finishing first. I mean, and again, you can look at it one of two ways. Like and this was always the polarizing aspect of Kobe. Even in high school, people either loved him, admired him, or they thought he was like the cockiest, most arrogant person in the world. And again, you could look at that story and you could look at it one of two ways. He's nuts, right? Like that's what a crazy person would do.
Yeah.
Or you could look at it and be like, wow, like he just didn't want to lose. Like he just didn't want to lose, and he would do whatever it took, even if it meant bending the rules or, I look at it like now I can fully appreciate, like, it was just that it was a mindset. It was like, okay, I'm not going to lose at anything. I'm going to be the best player in the world. I'm going to get to the NBA. There were these things that were non-negotiables, and he actually talked about this. I heard about it in the press a lot, like toward the end of his career, and maybe right after he retired. But he would always talk about these non-negotiables. If he set a schedule for himself, regardless of what else was going on, that schedule was non-negotiable. If I'm working out this time, nothing was going to get in the way of those workouts. I have a goal of being the best player in the world. Non-negotiable. I am going to lift weights X amount of times per week. Non-negotiable. And he stayed true to a lot of those things. And it was just that mindset that he had that, like, all sort of people that accomplish great things in their lives seem to have. It's like, you can't be distracted by anything else. And I think that's where a lot of the perception of arrogance came into play, right? Like, there were people in high school, in our high school, that didn't really like him. They didn't know him, It's like, yeah, he's got a lot on his mind. He's trying to decide, whether to go to college or the NBA. Like, he didn't go out and party a lot because he was always practicing. Obviously, I told you about the before school practice, the after school practice, the after practice. We would play on Sundays. We would find different gyms in the area and just go play pickup, which was awesome. But it was a full-time gig for him. And again, like high school kids, they want, if you don't come out and you're not partying, it's like, oh, you must think you're better than everybody. But it wasn't that. It was just the non-negotiable terms he set for himself in order to become the great player that he was. But the guys that were on the team, and like the times that we had, again, like, before games, after games, during games, practices, traveling, you saw a different side of him that not everybody got to see. Like, not a lot of people got to see it, but he was a high school kid like everybody else. Like, we would listen to the Fugees, which was like, I like, there are certain songs, like there's certain songs that like just remind you of like a time and a place.
Yes.
So the Fugees album, I think, came out, it had to have been during the season. It might have been toward the tail end of the season, the Score, which was like just an amazing album. And
yes,
one song in particular that starts out by saying, like, we used to be number 10, now we're permanent 1. And I remember the night we won the state championship, we had like an after party at like one of the cheerleaders' homes that lived kind of near where we did. And we just had that song on repeat, like, because before the season, I think we were predicted to come in like 10th in like all of southeastern Pennsylvania, and then we ended up winning the title. So the song was very prevalent to our season.
Symbolic. Yeah.
Every time I hear that song, I can just remember all of us like at the house, and it was really the first time that I saw him completely relaxed, because we accomplished what we needed to accomplish, for him especially. Like, he got the state championship ring. He got everything that he set out to do in high school. So he could like kind of just relax, and we just were hanging out, listening to music. And but that album always, like, there's just it just reminds me so much of that year. It's a great album, but like
it is.
yeah,
It is.
it was cool to see that side of him. And again, like there were, you know, you just other people didn't get to see that. They just saw this swagger. You know, like when you walk through the hallways as a high school kid and ESPN is following you with a camera, it's got to be difficult to have the perception of being humble. You know what I mean? Like, what could he do? Like, what was he supposed to do? Like, you know, like it just. I remember that day that and this was, you know, now it's things have obviously changed and social media and everybody, but like, you know, like there were like camcorders back then. You know, like those giant camcorders or like those real small crappy screen ones and. But yeah, like ESPN like followed him for the entire day. It was so bizarre. So I understood why people thought that, but every time I'm asked about him, it's always the same. He was just such a he was so focused on a certain goal at that age that I guess people just perceived him to be that way. But he was anything but that. But I think it's like, you know, his circle wasn't gigantic, you know, so he didn't have time to do things that the normal high school kids did. I mean, like he took Brandy to the prom.
I was going to ask you if there's the story about the whole thing with him and Brandy at the prom, like the behind the scenes story. We get like the paparazzi and everybody was at the prom and he was trying to get Brandy's number and stuff. Like, talk to me more about behind the scenes with the whole thing with Kobe and Brandy.
So two things. And again, I was a year younger, right? So I wasn't at that prom. I mean, I was lucky to be at my senior prom, you know.
Yes.
There was a good amount of backlash from that night because, again, people are, you know, they're like, oh, great, he's bringing this celebrity to the prom. Who does that? You know, there were bodyguards there and, you know, early days, like paparazzi, like you said, paparazzi and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, but again, people need to step back and be like, come on. Like, now to me, that was always an indication. Like, I think he knew on some level, like where he was headed. Not because he was going to LA or anything, but like, it just seemed normal that he was going to have this. I mean, Brandy at the time was like monster celebrity, right?
Alicia, yeah.
Alicia, yeah, M to the O to. I just remember that theme song, like, you know.
That's great.
Gore, I mean, just stunning. And it was just like, oh, okay. Like, I mean, it was shocking, obviously. Like when you see it, you're like, whoa, like, but I never really understood like why people hated it so much.
Yeah.
They felt like they were taking the attention off of your prom. Like, come on, get over yourself. It's prom for crying out loud. You know, it's not a matter. I mean, like my prom the next year was not nearly as glamorous or memorable. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, okay, like great. But yeah, it just went to the polarizing nature of kind of who he was. There's another funny story I have from earlier that year. There was a really popular female basketball player in our area named Kristen Clement, I believe her name was. Her nickname was Ace, which is funny we'll get into that later, but
yeah.
She was an unbelievable. She actually played at Tennessee under the late great Pat Summitt.
Yep.
Left-handed, tall, gorgeous. I mean, like, unbelievable. We were at an away game. I forget who we were playing. She was there with, like, her friends, you know, people on the basketball team. I think it was Cardinal O'Hara, I think. We're on the bus ride home, and Kobe comes up to me, and he's like, hey, what are you doing after this? You know, I'm going to bed, you know, like, school tomorrow, you know, like, this is like a Tuesday night. Because I need you to come with me. I'm hanging out with Ace tonight, and but I need somebody else to be there. She's bringing a friend. I need to bring a friend.
Oh.
Again, I'm like, just like the before school practice. I'm like, absolutely, you know, like I'm down. Like let's do it. We went to this. There used to be this restaurant in Suburban Square, which is really close to where Lower Merion is. It was Ruby's. I think it was Ruby's. It's no longer there. It's some high-end coffee shop, croissant place, you know. But we, I remember we went there, and her friend was very much like me. She on the shorter side. It was like her wing woman, you know, and the idea was like they didn't want to make it look like they were on a date. This is like a group hangout.
Yeah.
We go to this place. Now, Ruby's used to have these big glass windows, like you could see in, like all. We sit in the booth, and it was like Kobe was sitting across from Ace. I was sitting. I don't even remember the girl's name because I didn't say one word the whole time. Either did she. We just sat there, and Kobe and Ace were just kicking it, you know, just hanging out, whatever. So obviously, like word gets out, like you know, Kobe's out, and people were like lining up along the windows, like staring. It was such a weird night, like. And again, I don't think I said more than I took as many shots in the preschool practice as words I said that night. We just sat there. We were like we were the cover, you know, to not make it look like they were on a date. But it's like, you know, all this like I can't imagine what that feels like to have that much. You can't even go out to get something to eat. You know, you got to bring people with you to make it not look like it's like a date. That was a funny night, though. That was a really. But it, you know, again, it's like when you have stuff like that happen, and you have, you know, you're out to dinner and people are just staring at you. You know, like taking. I don't even. I mean, cameras back then there were no. You know, it was like Polaroids and disposable cameras as opposed to, you know, which I kind of miss Polaroid cameras. I feel like they should really be more in vogue right now.
They should.
There was something so amazing about the picture coming out and shaking it out. And, but, you know, that was those, you know, the Ace thing and like the Brandy thing. It just, I think people were just, quite frankly, it's jealousy. I mean, let's cut through all the crap. It's all, they wish it was them, you know, and it was not having the attention on them. But he never like, I just never got the sense that he was that way. I could understand why people thought that about him, but I would always be quick to say, like, listen, that's not who he is. This is just, you see him in these moments, like you see him before a game, he's so focused, you can't go up and talk to him then. Like, you need to let him be, you know, he's trying to do something here. But it all made sense looking back on all of the traits and characteristics that he had at 16. That's what everyone looks at now, and they call it the Mamba mentality. Like I've heard that term so many times. It like, you know, sort of like makes me cringe almost. Like you know, like so I have a nephew who's 10 years old. Kobe's his favorite player. I don't think he ever saw him play or was old enough to like remember seeing him play. YouTube, social media, you see it, and everyone takes that Mamba mentality, but the Mamba mentality was born way before it became a common term in our vernacular, you know, like it's so used now, but when you saw it at its infancy, like I didn't recognize what it was at the time. Again, there were moments where I thought like he's just crazy, like he's just a crazy competitive person. But that's where it started. And so, you know, when people ask like, did you know he was going to be this good? Did you know? Like, yes. But it just seemed kind of, you know, like when you have a 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid gets drafted, you know, it's like, you know, he makes statements like he's going to be as good as Jordan or he's going to be better. You're like, but like he was serious about that. And so, you know, that's why like that All-Star game where him and Jordan went up against was so special.
Oh, yeah.
It's someone he talked about and emulated a lot, you know, like, kind of same mannerisms, the same drive. You know, you hear stories about Jordan, and Kobe was as close to Jordan as anyone, in my opinion, will ever be.
By far.
And it all started from just having this insane ability, but also an insane work ethic, just to never let anyone outdo him. Like, you hear stories about, like, Jay Williams, who played at Duke, was in the NBA for a little bit before
Chicago Bulls again.
yeah,
That motorcycle accident.
yeah. Good guy. Jay's a good guy. I've talked with Jay a couple times.
That's dope.
And he has this story about, like, showing up to practice, or, like, he was going to make it made it his quest to get to pregame warmups before Kobe.
Mm-hmm.
Like 3 hours before the game, and Kobe was already there sweating, and like,
Yeah.
who does that? And then there were stories from the Dream Team, or not the Dream Team, good Lord, the Redeem Team, which, again, like, did you see that documentary on Netflix?
It was great.
Yeah, it was great. And again, like, you saw, like, Kobe running over Pau Gasol, and, like,
Yes.
like, again, stories about him showing up and working out at a certain time. I think Chris Bosh mentioned it, and like, I saw, like, yeah, like, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I saw it. Like, I was Pau Gasol. I mean, I wasn't as tall, but, like, I used to get the crap kicked out of me, like, same amount. Like, I would get dunked on constantly, and, like, just thrown out of the way, but he needed that. He needed guys to just really pester him, because it was going to be like that in games. He would be double teamed a lot, if not every game. But yeah, the mentality that he had was from a very young age, and just became amplified as he became more and more famous. And now it's taken on this mythical sort of feature, to where, like, but the true, and I know times were different, because social media didn't exist. I always wonder too, like, if social media was at its height when Kobe was, like, really playing, would he have let people into that world of how hard he trained? Because now, like, everybody will film their workouts, #Mamba mentality. And it's like, is that what,
ridiculous?
yeah, like, I'm like, is that what it's about? Is it about showing people, or is it about doing? Like, there was another documentary that was done on Showtime, I think it was. Came out in 2015. Gotham Chopra did the film, and it was right after he had the Achilles injury, and it showed his rehab, how he got back into it. And that really was, like, one of the first times it really shined a light on how hard he worked, and let people into that. But for him, it wasn't about, like, showing people. It was just about doing it. And if people saw it, cool. If someone was at the arena 5 hours earlier, cool. But I don't know, like, social media has changed everything. And
yeah,
now it's like, if people don't see it, they don't believe it. And like, I don't know that we would have filmed that workout at 5 a.m. at the Ardmore gym. I would have liked to have that footage. I didn't remember what that was like.
It'd be a memory. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a crazy memory. But yeah, man, like, all that stuff was just, it was always there. And again, like, after he passed, it was like, how, like, when people die, their memory becomes legend. Like, all this stuff now is like, it's just the stuff of legends. You take on this mythical sort of feature about yourself, where people, they look at him differently. It's his memory will never go away. Like, it'll never ever go away, because it's going to be hard for someone to be like him.
Yeah.
I don't know that they make people like that anymore. I don't know. Maybe he was sort of the last of that breed. Because really, like, with Jordan and himself, and look, all due respect, like, I'm a LeBron fan. It's hard to deny his talent, his ability. I don't know. It just they're just different. I don't ever like to, because people, that's another question that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
Look, sports talk and sports debate shows are built for topics like that. Obviously, I'm going to be biased in my opinion, but I don't know if guys are willing to put in that much work anymore without it being showcased for public consumption. You know what I mean? Like, are you doing it because the camera's there, or would you be doing this, you know, if no one's looking? I don't know. I don't know. But he was just, yeah, he was just different. He was just different, and he accomplished everything that he set out to do at a very young age. You know, like I remember the day of we had a press conference in '96, right after we won the state championship. And again, now every Division I athlete has a press conference. They're totally normal. Back then they were like, what is going on? You know, like, and again, like, you're not gonna have a press. I always felt like, okay, once it was decided he was gonna have a press conference, like, okay, he's going to the league. Like, you just don't have a press conference again in '96 to announce. And I know like Felipe Lopez had one, but that was more like because he was staying hometown, and there were rumors that Kobe might play at LaSalle, where his dad was working, and maybe Duke or North Carolina. Like, there was one day where we were walking through the hallway at school, and we went into the main office, and there was an area that had all the sports. They were like little cubbies, and that's where recruitment letters came in from all the different sports. So we go in there one day. He's like, all right, he's like, I want to show you something. All right, cool. Go in there, and like men's basketball was like overflowing. Like there were letters like overflowing coming out there. Wow. And all the other sports, there were a handful scattered, throughout. And then he like went behind the desk, pulled out like a bin of like letters, and then like there were two bins plus the cubby filled with letters, and he dumps them out on the table, and I'm just like leafing through them. Duke, North Carolina, every school in the country. It's funny. I think back to him, like, I should have taken one of those letters. Like, I just should have taken one just to have. Like, I would have loved to have seen like what Dean Smith wrote him and like Coach K. But like every school was like, I mean, it was just nuts. And then ultimately, he just he announces he's taking his talents to the NBA, and off we went. But yeah, he knew, and I think all of us knew he was going to be good. But I don't know to this level. But again, he always used, doubt and people questioning him to motivate him. And again, that's a trait that has stayed with me to where all throughout my life, being faced with difficult situations or, that's impossible, right? Like, you'll never do that. Like, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it's just, again, it's when you're around people like that, you believe anything is possible.
Yeah.
Kevin Garnett once famously said, anything is possible. Like, there's another great Kobe quote that became somewhat famous where it was like, he said that, anyone can become a master of their craft if they're willing to put in the time and work into it.
I remember.
Most times, people have an idea, a thought of, whether it's, I want to get in shape, or I want to write a book, or I want to, become CEO. I mean, all of these things are possible if you're willing to put in the time necessary. And he knew that. And again, going back to the arrogant thing, he didn't have time for all this other stuff because he was so focused on this goal. So he would, family, friends, hanging out, being a normal high school kid, that stuff didn't apply to him because he was so focused on getting better every single day. And it's a great lesson for everybody, that things are achievable, but it was just a non-negotiable thing. Like, if you say to yourself, I want to become CEO of this company, it might take a long time, but are you making strides every day to further yourself? Are you working? Are you putting in more hours than anyone else? Are you really dedicated to something, or do you just like the idea of maybe being able to become that great one day in whatever field you're in, whether it's screenwriting, whether it's landscaping, whether it's, architecture, whatever. Like, you have the ability if you dedicate yourself and put in the time. And that's what he was big on. And it had a lasting impact on a lot of people. And again, after he passed away, I think that those thoughts that he had became more widespread and people really they're like, man, it's almost like they're sometimes they're doing things like in his memory. You know what I mean? Well, he said it, and he was my favorite player ever, so I can do anything, which is great. I mean, people,
Yeah.
people need motivation. They need inspiration when things get tough. And he had another. He's got so funny. One night I was like Googling like famous Kobe quotes. There's like hundreds of them out there. And I don't know how many of them were like actually his, but like there's a lot of really good ones. And like another one that I love too is like, like he talks about the storm will eventually pass. Like no matter how bad, hurricane, rains, whatever, it eventually will pass. And you need to be ready. And obviously it's a metaphor for life, that like, okay, things might be hard now. Like when you first started doing the YouTube channel, first started posting, and you get the first follower, like, oh my God, it's great, and then maybe it slows down, and it's like you have that moment of doubt where you're like, can I do this? Like, is this actually worth it? And then that storm will pass. If you keep working, it will pass. Next thing you know, 100 followers, 1,000 followers, 15,000. You know what I mean? Like it's a matter of always thinking in a positive way, but more so than that, it's like doing the work to put yourself in the best position possible. And only you know that. Only I know how much work we do. Like, or do we just like the idea of like, yeah, I'm going to get better today. What'd you do? Nothing. Well, then it's just words. Like it's bullshit. But he was like the biggest example of just like putting in the work. Like a lot of other things can happen in life. You control how much you put into it, and you control your destiny. Like you have the power. It might take long. It might take a long time, but as long as you are putting in time and effort every day, you're at least putting yourself in the best position possible to succeed. And that's something I think that like everybody can look at and adapt to their own lives. You know what I mean? It's not about, look, I could practice from now to eternity. I'm not playing in the NBA. This is not going to happen. Quite frankly, I couldn't even shoot that well. But, it's like we all have something that we love to do and passions we want to pursue. It's about like just making sure you're doing everything that you can at the end of every day, being honest with yourself. Like, did I do as much as I could? How can I get better? And that's one of his most, it's just a lesson that will never die and has probably inspired thousands, if not millions of people, kids especially. But that was just one of the great things about him is the imprint he left on people,
It's beautiful. When he passed, like you just started seeing more of an appreciation of what he has done, not just for basketball, but just like in life in general, with his motivational quotes and him going to do writing, creative writing, and doing, deal basketball and winning an Oscar. You just see that he was like, like you could just see the work ethic and just the focus and the drive he had, not just for basketball, but also for the passion for creative writing and everything. And we just started just appreciating it a lot more. And it's like the old saying, it's like you have to appreciate when they're here on this earth, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't really do that. They just wait until that person passes and they just started now appreciating it. And, it's kind of really sad. It's like you got to appreciate who's here on this earth. And, man, Kobe was just everything to a lot of NBA players today. You see a lot of NBA players emulating Kobe Bryant with, just like in the mannerisms or like just the way he played, and just brought in like people to bring in the hard work necessary and the passion that they have to do their craft and give people, performance and do something for them to win. But they would never have like that killer mentality, that Mamba mentality that he had.
The day that he passed away, I remember that like, I was driving home from my parents' house my phone started like going ballistic. I'm like, what is going, like it was a Sunday. It might have been like right after noon, like 12:30 or so. And when I finally got home and checked my phone, I was like, it's like a gut punch where you're like,
Yeah.
this is this got to be fake. You first thought, this is fake. This can't be true. And then when you find out it was true, it was like, I still maintain to this day that, like, if my dad passed away, I wouldn't have got that many phone calls. Like, I was getting phone calls from people I haven't spoken to in years that were in tears, and it's like, wow, like that's the day I really understood the impact that he had on people. Was when I was getting calls and messages from people that never met him, you know, and it just hit them so hard because he was a guy that you thought was going to be around forever, right?
Yeah.
Much like Jordan, and just continue to be successful at whatever he did. You mentioned, I mean, he put out a series of books. He got the Oscar for the short. He started his own production company. Like, you just saw, like, the next chapter of his life was going to be probably as prolific as his NBA career was. Again, you just take that mentality, you just put it into a different field. The field doesn't really matter. It's the drive, it's the work ethic of the person. But when he passed, I mean, like the flood of calls that came, and I was like, whoa, like I didn't know that he had that impact on you. And it's because you don't fully appreciate something until it's gone. It takes, unfortunately, I mean, like in real life, weddings and funerals are the times you see people that you don't get to see hardly ever. It's like, why does it take this incredible of a thing, or this morbid sort of event to bring people together? But that's just the way it is. We don't really fully appreciate life until there's something really catastrophic that happens in a bad way or in a good way. But as I was telling you too, the day he passed, as strange and as out of nowhere and as tragic as that day was, just from a teammate perspective, for me and also for my writing partner, it had an extra element that just made it even stranger. So I have my writing partner's name is David Young. He's a guy who went to Lower Merion with me. He was my year. I've known him since I was 13. Brilliant writer, funny, creative, just a joy of a person to work with. So back in 2018, I went to my friend Dave, who had just gotten back from LA, who was working in the entertainment world, doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff, working as a production assistant. And I had this idea for a screenplay that I've had since high school, since those days of sitting on the bench and watching him play. I had this idea for a screenplay about, a bench warmer who played high school ball with a guy who went on to become the best player in the world. And the bench warmer's life was always about this association that he had with his high school teammate. And he was a guy that was, smaller kind of guy, didn't get a lot of attention from girls. Everybody wanted to talk to him, but it was always about his teammate, always about his teammate. So finally, when he's in college, he decides, I'm just going to lie a little bit about how close I was with him. And that lie snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And fast forward 20 years later, his entire life is wrapped around this lie that he's best friends with his high school teammate. And obviously it was inspired by my relationship with Kobe. And so after we sat down and wrote the script, I took it to Kobe in late 2019. After months of badgering him, I was like, you got to read this. I'm like, you just please read this. It's kind of based on our relationship. I think you'll love it. Finally got him to read it. He read it. He was into it. And in my mind now, I'm like, again, maybe slightly delusional. I'm like, he's going to be in it. We're going to do this together. And off we go.
Yeah.
And then a couple months later, dies in a helicopter crash. And you're like, whoa, like, okay, like this is not how this is going to go. And kind of goes to my overall theory too, just about how sometimes when things seem too good to be true, they are. And it seemed too easy. Like, again, my life before that, I was a personal trainer for 15 years. I thought my life was always going to be in fitness. And when I had this idea, again, the stems of it were I'm going to get him to be a part of it, maybe even be in it. He just started this production company. He's coming off this Oscar. Everything seemed perfect. Like it was like, this is how this is going to go. Took me a while to get him to read it. I get it. People are busy, blah, blah, blah. Got him to read it. He was into it, and then gone. Your hope and your vision was so clear and was so possible that it was almost like too perfect to be true.
Yeah.
And then it just got wiped away. So, that night, that Sunday night that he passed away, you couldn't put on any station on the TV without it being mentioned. Every, CNN, the local news, everyone's calling. They want to talk. And I was just like, I can't do this right now. Like, I didn't talk to anybody for a while because it was so hard to process what had happened. It was so tragic and so, like I said, just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it just, now I have this other element where I have this screenplay that I'm trying to get made. I was trying to get him to be a part of it. I'm that's in the background. That's secondary, but I can't lie. It was on my mind. I'm like, shit, like, what does this mean now? And then I go back to the one of his quotes about the storm, and the storm will eventually end. And like, I know that if it was him that was in the situation, he would not let this horrible, sad event stop him from getting the job done. That's just not how he's wired. Again, the storm will eventually stop. It's going to take some time, and you're going to have to rework some things, and you're going to have to take a different angle on this, but like, you can't stop. Like, I always maintain that he would be pissed if I stopped and we didn't continue to try to get this made. And really it's sort of as I told you on the phone, it's sort of a love letter to the person that he was and the impact that he had on not only me, but on others. Just about, especially in today's world, that it's your value as a person and who you are is not based upon who you know. All that, it's horseshit. It's, who cares, But you go on Instagram and everyone's posing for pictures with someone they just met outside a restaurant, and the caption says, "Great night hanging with my boy." It's like, you just took a picture with them. Like, you're not hanging out with, you're not friends with them, Like, it's so crazy because, like, throughout my life, I met people from all over the country, and inevitably somebody would have a friend who knew Kobe or played with Kobe, or, and 99% of the time it was not true. It was like, it was like, oh, my friend so-and-so played with him. And I'm like, that guy's like 8 years younger than us. Like, he couldn't have played with us. You know what I mean? But like, that's the thing. And then that's sort of where this idea for the screenplay started, was that like, everybody kind of wanted to have a story about him, like they wanted to be able to tell their friends they played against him in high school, or they dunked on him in high school, or they hung out with him at a party. And it was just about having this association with him. And especially after his passing, more and more, like the pictures that were posted, the stories that you heard, everybody just wanted to have a piece. Sadly, I mean, but that's just kind of how we're wired. It's about how many followers you have and how many dope pictures you can put up. It's ridiculous. And the underlying, theme of our script is that it's not about who you know, it's about who you are that really matters. It's the person that you are and how you conduct your life. That's the measure of who you are as a person, not who you played high school basketball. I mean, like, that's a part of my life. Obviously, it's a big part of my life, but it's not all encompassing who I am. but it's significant. I mean, because it had a lasting impact. I mean, we're still talking about some of these stories nearly 30 years later. But yeah, like, you start thinking about time and how fast it sort of goes sometimes. And you're like, wow, it's been 5 years since he passed. And, again, like sometimes out of sight, out of mind. He'll never be out of mind at all. It's just his impact on modern day NBA players and people always referencing him. But, it seemed like it just sort of got lost in the shuffle. His name kind of falls out of the conversation about the best player ever, and just it's human nature for that to happen. But I just wanted to share some of the stories that sort of made him who he became, who he always knew he was going to be. So it's always fun to look back on times like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I love the stories, man. I definitely do appreciate you telling me these stories. It means a lot. Because story about that time when they faced against Chester High School, when Kobe belittled his own teammate just because he messed it up. But he avenged himself eventually. He avenged himself.
Dude, so it was the state semifinal. We were playing Chester High School, loaded team, probably Lower Merion's rival, I would say, during that year, because we not only played them in the district final, which was at Villanova, and we won that game. We played them in the state semifinal, like it was like 5 games later, and that game was at the Palestra, very famous place where University of Penn plays. And both games were really tight, like really, really tight. The game at the Palestra, I still maintain one of the greatest games I've ever seen. I mean, I had one of the best seats in the house. I was front row, on the bench. So back and forth game, and we were up like 6 or 8 points with like under a minute left. Time to ice it away. Like we should get out of here, off to the state final. And our starting point guard, one of my friends who I've known for a long time, a guy by the name of Emery Dabney, committed like 3 straight turnovers. Gave it up, they scored. Gave it up, they scored. Gave it. In the blink of an eye, the game was tied with like 10 seconds left, and Chester had the ball. And I remember as timeout was called and our guys were coming off the court, Emery was nearly in tears. I don't think he was crying. He was close. And Kobe was laying into him. Oh, what are you doing? Get your shit together. And he's like grabbing him and like, what are you doing? You're blowing it. I mean, he was in his face. And when you have a moment like that, it was like, I mean, it happened so fast that like everyone was stunned. Like we were stunned. We had the game won. And, you figure like, all right, give the guy a minute, let him get his hit. No. It was the opposite. In his face. I mean, like in his face. Get it together, suck it up. We have the next play. Like the game is not over. Like we need, like there was this. And this is, again, this goes to the perception, because if you're watching it from the stands, you're like, what an asshole. Like, what's he doing? Like, dude, what do you, like, leave him alone, But there was a very specific reason why he was doing that, because he knew, again, much like Jordan did and much like Kobe talked about, he needed his teammates to be successful. He could not do this by himself. No one could do it by themselves. Yes, Jordan, greatest player ever. My opinions vary. Jordan had a good team around him. He had guys that had their roles, and he needed them to win. Jordan didn't win every year he was in the league. He won 6 out of 8 years. Maybe would have been 8 out of 8 if he stayed for the 2 where he went off to play baseball. Another story for another day. But he knew that he needed Horace Grant, B.J. Armstrong. He needed Dennis Rodman, Luke Longley, Kukoc. He needed those guys and that's why he pushed them so hard. Kobe was the exact same way. So there's like 10 seconds left in the game. We're coming out of the timeout. Emery has got it together. The potential tears that were there were dried. Again, I don't know if he was crying, but he was I would have been sobbing. I would have been crying uncontrollably. We come back out of timeout. Chester has the ball. Their point guard, guy by the name of John Lenahan, who went on to play college ball, great high school player, had a nice college career, was the fastest person I've ever seen on the court. He was lightning fast. He's got the ball at the top of the key, clock's running down. Everyone in the stands starts slowly rising. Like you could feel the moment getting there. Like this is going to be a buzzer beater. Like we might get upset. Everything's going to hell. And Emery is guarding Lenahan, and they run like a four corners. The other four guys, not four corners, like the other four guys went to the baseline, cleared out. It was a clear out. So like it was like guy here, baseline here, but like it was 1-on-1. Emery, after going just through this horrible emotional roller coaster of costing his team the game, Kobe's yelling at him, the crowd is going crazy, and it's 1-on-1, and he's dribbling, slowly coming at him. At one point, I think Lenahan said something to him, and on the video, you see Emery like shake his head. It's it's something out of like a movie. Like Emery like shakes his head, like, yeah, come on, bring it. Lenahan goes to his right, crosses over to his left, foul line, pull up. Emery blocked it. Not only blocked it, but like he blocked it into the floor. The ball bounced off someone's leg, went into the backcourt. Game goes into overtime.
Wow.
Now Emery's like pumping his chest, like he's like walking to the bench, like, yeah, that's right. And Kobe's hyping him up. He's like, that's what it like. It went like the swing of emotions and the attitude and just everything. The atmosphere switched so quickly from we blew it, now you're the hero. Like, and again, Kobe not a part of it at all, but he knew how to get people to that point to where it's like, I don't care what's happened. We need you right now. And he came up big. I mean, it was the biggest block shot history of Lower Merion. It saved the game. And then, of course, overtime, Kobe went nuts. Like, there's one highlight that everyone's seen where he gets a defensive rebound, goes coast to coast. At one, he did one move where he went like between his legs, like from behind, split two defenders, dunked and got fouled, and the place went nuts. Like the roof like blew off the place. Like and that sealed the game. And then we went on to win the state championship. But that's a story that like, okay, we can see the two sides of it. When you're on the inside and you see the result and you see what he was trying to do, you understand it. You're watching from afar. Again, you're like, what's he doing? Like, leave the guy alone,
He's laying him up for no reason at all.
I mean, obviously the result will lead you to believe that he did it for the right reason, which I believe he did because, when people get down, you can let them sulk, you can stay there, or you can rally them back and be like, dude, like okay, forget it, And the greats have a very short, the greats have the memory, short-term memory. They can just forget about what just happened. It's all about, I missed 100 shots, I'm going to make the next one, And Kobe knew that we needed that out of Emery, and he got that out of him. Fast forward a couple years, Kobe's first playoff experience. I don't know if you've ever heard this story, but everyone's seen the highlights against the Utah Jazz.
The air balls, yeah.
Air balls, right? This is like sums his personality and his work ethic up so much, and his belief in himself. So that game, I remember watching that game and watching the air balls, and you're like, what is going on? Even after the first one, to take the second one, another air ball. I'm not sure the exact number. It must have been at least 3. The fact that he kept shooting was crazy. Kept failing, but kept shooting because he thought, okay, this one's going in. Okay, this one's going in. Okay, this one's going. Oh, by the way, this is on national television. This is against the Jazz in the playoffs. Like, It's crazy. That night, fly back to LA. Again, what can you do? Like, go back to your house, sulk, woe is me. Oh my God, that was so embarrassing. Not what he did. Went to a local church, I think, or a local high school. I think it was a high school, not a church. think he went to a local high school. Again, had the janitor let him in, shot till like 3 a.m. By himself.
Wow.
Yeah. That night. That night. And when you hear it, you're like, no, that's bullshit. It's a fable. No, being there to see what he was, that story makes complete sense to me. And he told the story, so I mean, I believe him. But that's just that again. That goes to, and he was doing that for Emery in that moment. Okay, you screwed up. Now what? What are you going to do when things get really hard? Because again, being publicly embarrassed in front of the world, national television, playoffs, that's enough to really kill someone's confidence.
Yeah.
You allow it to, right? And again, like I always go back to how I kind of take that into my own life. So like, you spend years writing scripts, right? Yeah. So we have 3 scripts that we're actively shopping around right now. You spend all this time living in this fictitious world that you've made up, creating characters, creating story, creating this, creating that. The hour, not sleeping and taking any meeting you can and sending thousands of emails out like every day. And then you hear, no, this is not for us. This is not a good time. We don't do stuff like this. It's not good enough. It needs this. It needs that. The first time you hear no, it's an interesting test of your will. Because I know why people quit. I would have understood it if Emery couldn't go back in the game. I could understand it if that night Kobe drank a bottle of wine and felt bad for himself. Life doesn't work like that. If you allow it to defeat you, you'll be defeated. But if you use it as motivation, like Kobe would always say, people doubted, why is this high school kid coming to the pros? Who does he think he is? He's not going to make it. Okay, I'll show you, right? Again, with the Emery situation, okay, you screwed up. What are you going to do now? I'm going to make the game-saving block. Save the day. Okay, you've reached out to someone 100 times that you haven't heard back from them. What are you going to do tonight? Are you going to email them again, or are you going to give up? You've heard no 1,000 times. You're going to stop writing because someone said no, or are you going to keep pushing? You're going to keep pursuing, and it's the pursuit of excellence that separates, I think, good from great. Mm-hmm. But I understand why people quit things because it's hard.
It is.
You don't get followers for a month. Do you quit? I mean, it's a month. If you stayed with it 2 months, who knows what would have happened? You stay with it for a year, you don't know what's going to happen. So, again, all of those traits are just such great life lessons for every person in every walk of life that I think that's why he's so appreciated now. Could it have been more when he was alive? Maybe. I think he was just starting to get into that. He was making himself more accessible. If you remember, there's that great picture of him and his daughter at the Laker game with LeBron. You know what I mean? You started to see him do things that he didn't get to do before because, again, it was like after we won the state championship. I finally got to see him relax. Kick it, pizza, Fuji's. Life is good right now. Retirement. He was at peace with being done. 5 championships. Family. He was relaxed. You saw him at the game. He's, that was such a cool moment. I think that was days before he died, actually, that game. But it just wasn't. You finally got to see him, and he was becoming more engaging with the public because he didn't have to worry about being the best at what he did anymore because he knew. But he knew that those sacrifices were necessary, and it just goes to the underlying theme of if you want to be great, you can be great at anything if you dedicate yourself to it and really throw yourself into it and not let anything stop you from getting better every single day.
I appreciate you coming on, giving me these wonderful Kobe stories. We want to keep Kobe's memory alive, just the stuff with legends and also just telling the untold stories. that we never hear. We hear all them other stories all the time, but it's just great to hear like untold stories that we haven't even heard before. So I definitely do appreciate you coming on. And where could people can find you at in terms of social media?
Oh, my social media, they could find me at Robby Schwartz. Sign is SEIN. I'm a massive, this is so nerdy, massive Seinfeld fan, right? Probably, probably one of the most knowledgeable Seinfeld trivia people in the world. And my social media, I needed an outlet that was different from writing that would still kind of keep me engaged. So I run a daily I run a Seinfeld trivia page.
Nice.
And so people could find me there. Again, it's ROBBYSEIN and then SCHWARTZ. So I'm on Instagram. That's the only one I have because, quite frankly, it's so distracting. And as a writer, I try to limit my distractions as much as possible. So, I couldn't keep up with Snap and Facebook, and it was just too much. It was just too much. But I needed an outlet that was different from my script writing. So I started this Seinfeld trivia page. It's fun. People love it. But yeah, people can always contact me there. And, I try to stay as engaged as possible with all the people that come to the page for fun trivia about, the show about nothing that Seinfeld to me is the greatest show of all time. I have a lot of favorite shows, but that is the tops.
Hey, definitely. If you're a Seinfeld fan out there, definitely check out that trivia page. I'm definitely going to check out that trivia page because I'm a trivia guy. Yeah. I did love Seinfeld back in the day, so I'm going to try to answer them trivia questions as best as possible. So I'm going to definitely check out the page. Y'all should do it too as well. And this is the first episode of Shooting the Shit with ItzJustJP with my guest, Robby Schwartz. And we see y'all later. Peace and happy Thanksgiving. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks, man.